Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of Air Tycoon. Well, I said Air Tycoon, but I lied, sorry, this is Airway Sim. Yeah, I'm so used to doing that intro, I guess, that it just comes out even though I didn't mean it. But today, I want to give you guys about a 1 week update on both of my worlds and show you guys how they're doing. So as you guys can see, this last week has been pretty catastrophic in terms of profit, but I'll explain to you why that is in a bit. I'm actually doing perfectly fine in terms of income right now. But if we take a look at like the past monthly view, for example, we can see that I've been making pretty comfortably large amounts of money at extremely high profit margins. So like 50%, 45%. These are of course extremely high margins for an airline. And yeah, the reason for this is simply because I was running primarily cargo and was really profitable. If we take a look at my route images, you guys can see that I've just opened a ton of brand new routes, but I also have a ton of routes which are sitting on 100 image because they've been open for a long time and they're very profitable. If we take a look at some random routes that I've been operating, like London to Indianapolis, you can see that I'm managing to get, decent amounts of cargo being flown with, decent supply margins. Like some of these routes are oversupplied a little bit, but because I'm using a smaller aircraft in terms of capacity, I managed to grab kind of an equal share, almost, see, like 36% versus 39%, despite my competitor who is flying a DC-10 freighter and then flying a DC-8 freighter, which is, a big chunk smaller. And therefore, I believe it uses less fuel, even though it's older. It doesn't use less fuel by much, I don't think. So I'm gonna have to, replace them eventually. But I have a really good replacement plan for these DC-8s. I plan to replace them with 757 freighters, which are almost exactly the same size, except they use like 50% less fuel. They require one less pilot or like crew member, so all really nice stuff. And another thing you can tell here is this guy for some reason only uses Iqaluit as a stopover point, but let me show you why that doesn't really make sense. If I can open up Sky Vector here, if we take a look at this, if we want to fly from London to somewhere on the east coast of the United States, we can see that this route segment is, 3,000 nautical miles and passes directly over Gander. Most of the east coast is like this, yet for some reason my competitor is choosing to fly all the way up to CYFB, which is, over here and then over to London, which, as you guys can see, some of the route segments is much longer. This is what is this, like 4,000 nautical miles versus 3,500? A big waste. It's a big waste. It looks worse than it is because the north, of course, of the world is much smaller than it looks on a map. So it's only 500 nautical miles wasted, but that's still a lot of nautical miles for no reason in a really unfuel efficient plane. But yeah, for some reason he seems to be doing that always. Not here, CYYT. I actually don't know where that is. Let's take a look it up. Sorry about that. St. John's. Okay, St. John's is, less ridiculous. It's still not as, good as Gander in terms of the fact that Gander just seems to be on the exact correct path for everything. But yeah. Aside from that, let's take a look at the kind of routes I've been making and the kind of routes I'm planning to make in the future. Now, most of the cargo right now in the late 80s, early 90s basically, is between the US and the United Kingdom for me. If we take a look at these routes, some of them I've been unable to pull cargo demand over, like Long Beach. I've only been managed to grab 11,000 demands because Long Beach shares with Los Angeles, and most of the cargo is being flown to Los Angeles. But on other routes, such as Louisville, I've had a bit better luck pulling more of the cargo, though this route I believe is brand new, so it'll take some time before we see kind of truly how much cargo we can grab. I believe El Paso is new as well, but we've already been able to grab a considerable chunk of the cargo. So yeah, we should be able to yeah, for example, Birmingham. I believe this route is new too, but we've already been able to grab almost all the cargo demand, which is really nice because those kind of routes are going to be really profitable very soon. If we take a look at our route management page here, as you can see, the established routes all have almost 100% load factor on the United Kingdom to the US leg, because that typically has higher demand. And yeah, this is where you see the advantage of flying smaller aircraft. Now, as you guys can see, by flying smaller aircraft, manage a bigger share of the cargo than Hobbit Airways. And my airplanes are both full, and his probably is just slightly empty. If I add another flight, this effect will be exaggerated. In this game, smaller sized aircraft always win, especially if it's an efficient smaller sized aircraft. In the future, I really want to expand heavily into 757 freighters and A321 freighters. A321 freighters are some of the most ridiculous planes in the game. Unfortunately, I don't have the statistics for them right now, but basically they carry about 27,000 kilograms of cargo, which is about 65% as much as a 757, while using, I think, just about 60% as much fuel, which is truly ridiculous, because a lot of the time the 757s aren't completely full, and some of the time we have a route like this, like to Houston, where, as you guys can see, when they're oversupply margins get decently large, as they sometimes do. What was I looking at there? Houston. I was using it as an example. Let's just search it. Houston. Yeah, we can see that some of the plane is flying empty. The standard cargo and the light cargo are both flying slightly empty. I should probably zoom in a bit to make this easier to see on YouTube. Oh, that's probably too far. But yeah, like 40% versus heavy cargo 100%, where an A321 would probably have to have, heavy cargo would still be 100%, but this would probably be, 40%, this would be 60%, and the plane would be making basically roughly similar profit while costing less money, which is the entire point, is to fly the same thing while spending less money. If you take a look at some of the newer routes, yep, they're not doing too well yet. They're basically just losing as much money as they cost. Mostly because the route image is low, it's going to take a while to pull all the demand. But yeah, these routes should be good by the time their route images get higher. So yeah, I'm basically just waiting on that. I'm gonna try and buy as many new DC-8s as possible. Or not buy, but lease. Yeah, DC-8s in 1990 is generally not a great idea. But something I want to explain in a later episode, probably I'll record it later today actually, is planning for airplane transitions, because that is one of the weirdest you don't do it in any other game except for this game, for airline simulators. Or fleet transitions aren't nearly as important of a thing, but it's one of the weirdest and most unusual things that you don't really think about when playing an airline simulator, which is super important in this game due to the unique fact that you are limited to 3 fleet types by commonality costs, which is slightly unusual. But I'll explain to you guys that in a later episode, because it's kind of complicated, and I don't really have time for that right now, and I'm just going to go into my Hong Kong world, which is another world I'm doing decently in. The past week has been pretty turbulent in this world. If we take a look at maybe my quarterly view, as you can see, I had a really negative quarter here. This is due to 9/11, really reducing cargo demand and that kind of stuff. Passenger demand, all that stuff dropped like a rock. And in addition to being a new airline, it hit me really hard, but I luckily survived and so I'm able to continue this world, thankfully. It's going pretty well, like 20% margin. It's not bad, considering this is a brand new airline, flying inefficient MD-11s to Basically, MD-11s were the nicest freighter I could get off the used market. The other option was A300s. There's always a ton of A300s on the used market. But I didn't really want to use the A300 because, I don't know, I just simply felt like I couldn't make as much money with it as fast as I could with the MD-11. It's probably a better plane, given it uses less fuel, but at the same time, it carries less cargo. Which is not so much of a problem because MD-11s rarely ever fly full with the amount of cargo they can carry. But the main problem was just the range. 2,500 nautical miles of range makes it basically equivalent to a 757, and a lot of the cargo I want to fly is, you know, in this area of the United States. And with 2 stops, it's just enough range, and it's a bit of a headache to manage. Because first you gotta fly out to some Russian city around here, I can't remember its name, and then you gotta fly to like Inuvik or like somewhere around here, and then finally stop to the US, and each stop has to be perfectly the correct length, otherwise you won't be able to make it, and it's a big headache. Meanwhile, you can one stop everywhere with the MD-11 for just, you know, slightly more fuel cost. What's the MD-11's fuel consumption? Yeah, like what is that, like 30%, 25% more fuel, something like that. And for these certain routes, which you do find which can fill an MD-11, ooh, it makes money, really good money, like this route does. The one problem with running MD-11s or like large aircraft, you might say, well, why would you ever not? Look at how much money it's making, $588,000 from one route, and that's because it's just so vulnerable to competition. And what do I mean by that? Well, the way this game divides demand is it divides them evenly among flights. Now, you might say, nah, that's not really the case. I have 70% market share and my competitor has 30. But that's because, well, that's about the ratio of the demand bars. If he added another flight, this 115,000 cargo, or this cargo demand, 111,000 I mean, would be divided exactly into 3 pieces. Meaning he would get 2 of the pieces and I'd get 1, and this graph would instantly reverse into like something like that, and his expenses would be like lower compared to the amount of cargo he's flying. So you always want to fly the smaller aircraft while competing, unless there's spare demand, but you can't really reliably expect spare demand. These routes which are making this much money, like KOKC, K-Tulsa, what is 52%, is very high for what's it called? Is very high for load factors here. Are extremely rare. I mean, this route even has some spare demand, as you guys can see. So I'll add a 757 to that when I get the chance. But yeah, it's really rare to find routes like this with little to no competition. And that's the main reason why. Don't see a lot of successful airlines flying MD-11 freighters. In addition, you know, once they add flights to compete, the demand will be split per flight, and their per flight is less expensive than mine because they'll almost certainly be using a smaller aircraft. So yeah, with that in mind, what is my plan for future expansion? Well, for now, it's still using MD-11s, unfortunately. And that's simply because I can't find other good freighters on the used market. But as soon as I'm able to afford, I'm going to start using more and more Boeing 757s. Now, I'm going to do this right now, and I'm going to put in a large order for new 757s. There's so much demand from a city like Hong Kong for cargo that I can be pretty certain that I can make money even while leasing new aircraft. Now, I would rarely ever recommend leasing new aircraft for any airline. It's extremely risky, especially if you don't have spare demand. Profits are going to drop like a rock. And unfortunately, I can't afford 315 million. And I want this maximum discount of large order and long lease. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen until I hit 315 million, unfortunately. But it shouldn't be too long. If you take a look at my routes, a lot of them are kind of brand new. And once these things kind of accelerate, we should be making good money, like VHH to Portland. I mean, look at that. such juicy demand. Yes, this is going to be completely full later on. As you can see, there's more demand than supply, so this is going to be completely full MD-11. There's a few other routes which I have which are similar. Let's see if I can find them. St. Louis, it's not going to be completely full, but it's going to be pretty good. It's probably about like 70% load factor. Osaka, Itami, not as good as I hoped. I managed to pull 47,000 cargo over there. I think San Francisco is a really good one. Yeah, of course, mostly this cargo is one way, but that's just the way cargo is. Yeah, San Francisco looks pretty good too. Should be able to expect about 70% load factor on the Hong Kong leg, Hong Kong to San Francisco leg. Can't say the same for the opposite, but yeah, once these routes hit higher image values, I can expect my profit to probably double quite comfortably to 20 million a turn, which is not bad, but it's not great. And we're mostly just waiting on 757, so let me see if I can show you a lot of these 757 routes I want to make, because they are basically infinite. Yeah, if we just take a look at like some random cities, like with no thought put into it whatsoever, like it has the exact amount of demand for 757. You just have to make sure that it's a city with no other service. So for example, this city is very close to Tampa, so I can expect that the cargo demand is actually going to be shared with Tampa's airport, which is going to be somewhere around here. So this might not be a perfect route, but Northwest Arkansas, for example, has enough demand for 2 757s. And if we take a look at where the local airport is, I mean, can you think of another major city near here? Well, I certainly can, and I don't believe there is one, which means I can grab this entire amount of cargo. And I will tell you guys something, there is what appears to be like literally every US city can support at least one 757, and if not, like a route like this won't be losing money, it'll be like money neutral. Routes like this will be making so much money with just 757, or maybe even 2 could be profitable in this, like each 757 about 35,000 cargo demand. Atlantic City, it must share with some nearby airport. Oh yeah, it's near Philadelphia, it's near Washington DC. Quad City, as you can see, enough demand for 757. I should have mentioned this, 757 holds about 40,000 kilograms of cargo, but with the distance and number of stops it has to fly, I can realistically expect slightly less demand than that, or capacity than that, like maybe around 35,000. And even so, all these routes, as you guys can imagine, will just be massively profitable. Like look at this demand, it never ends. Let's see what happens when you get to like the 3rd page. Yeah, take a look at that. Even on the 3rd page, the first city I clicked can quite easily support 757. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is there's infinite cargo demand. I don't believe that it's possible to fill all of it in the time frame of the game, actually. I don't think I can request aircraft fast enough to fill all the demand. If we take a look at some random UK cities, I mean, they're just desperate for cargo as well. Yeah, keep in mind I have like only smaller airports selected, so if I do like greater than or equal to 2 for infrastructure level, I would just pick some random city, Oslo. As you guys can see, there's enough demand for a 757. Somebody's already flying it, so I'd try and compete with a smaller plane, maybe a 737 freighter with 2 stops to make it reach this range. But yeah, as you guys can see, it just never ends. The amount of routes which that have freighter demand is just, honestly, it seems infinite. Yeah, like look at this, I could add my own 757 to compete with his current 2. It really never ends. If we take a look at cargo to France, I mean, yep, that's more possible places to add supply, and it's truly incredible, guys. So this game I have high hopes for. Another thing is I already managed to arrange my alliance mate to buy me 50 757s, so that's a good start considering I only started negotiating today. Let's see if I can find his order. somewhere in here there's a 757 order. Maybe not. Maybe I can't find it. Let's see if we can command F it. Maybe he already had them ordered. I'm not sure. Nope, no 757s. Interesting. But yeah, I already managed to get one of my teammates to help me order some 757s, and there's more incoming in all these worlds. In this world, actually, I had enough money to supply my own 757s. If we take a look at my orders, aircraft orders, this is the London world, of course. As you guys can see here, EGLL, that's London. Yeah, I managed to order my own 757s and 767s. They're all leased, which is unideal. You really want to own your aircraft, but there's so much spare demand in these worlds too. If we take a look at my route opening, London Heathrow to the US at least has been somewhat saturated by me. If we take a look at this and search by infrastructure level greater than or equal to 3, you can see I've made routes to basically every single city, which I found practical. Certain cities like these, Austin, for example, has a ton of potential, but not a lot of current demand. And what that indicates to me is another airport has this route being flown. It might be London Gatwick to Austin or something like that, but this cargo is going somewhere else, and I don't want to try and compete with that. Meanwhile, a route like Kansas City, for example, although demand is basically flown to Heathrow, I mean, there's a little bit missing here. Maybe it's going to Gatwick, maybe it's going to Stansted, who knows? But it's not going to Heathrow anymore. But yeah, basically every single route which I thought was viable, I made. And then these are all the airports which are actually big enough to support a DC-8. Luckily, the 757 is a smaller category of plane. It's classified as large instead of very large. And if we take a look at that, there's just so many pages and pages of routes which we might want to make. Like this, I find incredible. This is Skagway. It's a town of about 900 people, actually, in Alaska. And it has 500 kilograms of cargo demand, which is pretty impressive. But if we take a look at slightly bigger cities, as you guys can see, there's just tons of cargo demand. This is 10,000 current demand, and I know if I open the flight, I can probably pull it to about, halfway. The current demand to about, halfway, which is 757. And it really just seems to never end. I mean, just every single random US city seems to be able to support a 757 cargo plane. So yeah, I'll easily need thousands in this world. Manchester, by the way, has about the exact same amount of cargo demand as London Heathrow, so I basically have 2 Heathrows to supply of cargo. Now, I don't have enough out-of-base aircraft to fully supply cities like Manchester, but we'll see what happens in the future. Yeah, especially once the EU opens, I'll probably want to open a hub in Germany somewhere as another cargo hub, and that will probably be more than enough bases for me. I also need to start focusing on Heathrow long haul, just like regular ass long haul passenger demand, which I've kind of been ignoring, and there's also tons and tons of that available. Yeah, if we take a look at, for example, let's just take a look at South America, for example. We have routes like this, which, we added some flights to this quite easily and make a ton of money. These are also all stopovered, and I plan to use the 767, which can fly this distance direct without too much difficulty. Not easily, but without too much difficulty. Routes like this, they're everywhere. If we take a look at North American hubs like Toronto, for example, it's not too badly oversupplied. And if we take a look at this, we have Maple Leaf Airlines and Hobbit Airways. Hobbit is having the majority right now of the passengers, but he's using DC-10s. DC-10s are very vulnerable to more efficient aircraft like the 767. Because if I had a 767 flight and he has a DC-10 flight, we're going to have the equal amount of passengers flying, except for me, it's going to be 80% load factor, and for him, it's going to be 40. Because this plane's almost twice as big, and my plane is not quite, but like more efficient at least for flying the same amount of passengers. So even though these routes look badly oversupplied, I can easily add multiple schedules of flights and still be super profitable on a lot of these routes. Yeah, all of these are, you know, I mean, Washington Dulles is actually close enough for me to fly a 757 passenger plane. So I plan to, you know, abuse that fact too, that I have access to 757 passenger plane variants, and he doesn't. I'm not sure what he plans to do with his fleet groups. If we take a look at him now, let's see, he is flying. He's starting to get rid of his 727s, and it looks like he's transitioning them into 757s. So he's going to be flying 757 and DC-10s. His 757s are basically going to be used domestically, which is somewhat questionable, but also a relatively smart transition choice, and I'll explain to you guys that maybe in a future episode. But I don't know what he plans to do with almost 700 DC-10s. It looks to me like he plans to transition them into MD-11s. He also has 123 orders for 767s, so he could be trying to transition into 767s, which would, in my opinion, be a smarter choice. But I'm not sure. He has them leased out right now, so that suggests to me that oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that these leases are on a limited time span of 3 years, so it does suggest to me that he wants to transition into 767s. But yeah, if he does so, I'm not sure. Like, that will make him pretty invulnerable to my competition, in all honesty. But all I can do is it takes him too long since he has such a large fleet to transition. I'm not. It really shouldn't be any trouble for him. He has so much money, and is so profitable. I don't believe I have a real chance at bankruptcy for him. He's first on transported passengers, profit, operating revenue, and total passenger revenue. His cargo revenue is not bad either, though. I'm gonna quite easily overtake him quite soon in this department. So yeah, that's pretty amazing. He's the most valuable company with the highest image, and he's the old, oh god. Yeah, why do I choose always the best competitors to compete with? I don't know. But yeah, this is going to be interesting. If he chooses to go 767s, yeah, there's not much of a chance for me to ever dent him in terms of profitability. In all honesty, like, I don't know how I'm going to do anything about that. But if he chooses to stay with DC-10s for a little bit longer, I'm in good shape. If he chooses to go with A340s, I'm also in good shape. But they also have this fleet group, A330, A340, is one fleet type, and once he gets access to the A330-200, which it will be released later, yeah, it's a magnificent plane. So you shouldn't have much trouble competing with my 7.6s after that. I eventually plan to change my 7.6s into A330 Neos. So yeah, that's my future plan. That means I'll be flying 757 and 7.6s for a long time before I finally manage to add a domestic fleet. So I'll probably be using 757s domestically as well for a while. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed just me rambling about this game, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.